And welcome into the Dino Construction Podcast. On today's episode, we talk RB buys, RB sells, as well as what we are looking to buy or sell them for. I'm your host, Justin, joined as always by David and JP. Not joined by David's picture like in our RB Tears and Theory episode, some tech issues. We are recording these back to back here, and I will be hopping out for some sections here because, as we mentioned in some of our previous episodes, I am in Germany until July. So some time zone issues, but wanted to make sure we get this pumped out to you. So if you're watching on YouTube, you'll notice a little bit of inconsistencies, but we wanted to make sure we got this actual advice to you.
So as you'll notice, we are down to two. We'll be coming back in with Justin here and there throughout the episode with the wonders of post-production editing. But JP and I are sticking it out here to finish this video for you guys. So right now I want to ask JP, when do you think a good time to buy RBs is throughout the year?
So I think right now in June through August, it is pretty risky to buy running backs because training camp injuries, they happen all the time. And right now, running back prices are pretty much set, so there's really not a ton of value to extract. So I would probably wait to the end of training camp before the season if you really need to buy an RB, or just wait till in season when we know who the guys are going to be. But early in the offseason, there's a point in time when veteran running backs, they're really cheap. You can get some really good values there, though it can be risky that the team that they are on, they could be drafting a rookie running back high in the draft potentially, but that ambiguity is typically priced in around, January, February, March time. But I think that buying early in the offseason like that is probably more valuable in years when the incoming rookie draft class is weaker, which we knew about this draft class. We knew there was not going to be a first round rookie running back. The year before we Bijan Gibbs, and we knew that running back class was pretty darn good. So, yeah, I would be a little worried if it is a strong running back class coming in. I might not be as willing to buy those running backs early. But in the weak draft classes, I'm going to do that because you can get guys like Najee Harris, Aaron Jones, for the 212, 301. I know Justin, he actually did that with those two players. And I thought it was a pretty good buy at that price point.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying here. I'm definitely pretty risk averse as well, especially not trying to buy a running back that might lose his job before he even plays a game. That being said, like you said, this price is typically baked in. So if it is a good running back class like next year and you are a gambler, it's probably the cheapest you're ever going to be able to find those guys. You just might burn your assets before you even get to see anything on them. So just kind of up to you and how you play when it comes to buying before the rookie drafts. I kind of think any time in the offseason is worth reaching out, trying to buy at a discount. People like to sell running backs, especially in the offseason, because of how much we talk about how they're not a good buy. So if you can get someone cheap, try to do it anytime. But I'm not paying full price for running backs until we get closer to the season. Even then, I'm really only looking to pay full price when I need one. And by that, I mean when I actually need to start them that week, not like, oh, hey, I could use one in a month or so. No, like if I need one this week, I'm going to go buy one. The other time would be if I'm gearing up for a playoff run and there's a trade deadline. If that's the case, then I do kind of have to look ahead a little bit.
Sweet. Well, let's move on to our running back buys here.
Yeah. Why don't you go ahead and tell us about your buy?
Well, my buy I have here is Javonte Williams. And after last year, he wasn't very good, so the community really soured on him. That makes sense to me, but the thing is, with the injury that he was coming off of, we kind of knew that he was not going to be efficient last year. It wasn't just a torn ACL, but he had a torn ACL, LCL, PLC. It was a pretty brutal knee injury. He came back even earlier than we were expecting. He played in the preseason, which was crazy. I don't know why. I don't know if he just recovered really fast or if they were just pushing him to come back. But regardless, we knew he wasn't going to be great. He wasn't. I think Breece Hall, overcoming it, that probably makes us, feel a little worse about Javonte not doing it. But Breece is younger, and it was just a clean ACL. What really makes me intrigued with Javonte Williams is Sean Payton specifically. Since 2011, the top 20 RB target share seasons, 8 of them have come from Sean Payton. So he's consistently up there at throwing the ball to his running backs. And since 2011 as well, Peyton's RB rooms have been top 6 in fantasy points per game in 10 of 12 seasons. So he's throwing the ball to the running back. He's using them. They're good in fantasy as well. So I think Javonte Williams as a a year out from that ACL recovery. He's going to be a lot healthier this year than he was last year, assuming he doesn't get injured again. And he's pretty cheap right now. On Keep Trade Cut, he is RB27. So at that price point, the guys in that range, not many other guys have the upside that he does possess because of how good Sean Payton uses his RB rooms. And also, they brought in Bo Nix. I've heard people call him Bubble Screen Bo. We've talked about his ADOT in the offseason as well. But he throws the ball to the running backs a lot. It matches up perfectly with what Sean Payton does. So I'm pretty confident in the RB target share that Javonte Williams is going to get, and even probably Jaleel McLaughlin as well.
Yeah, I think Javonte kind of stood out to me as a potential buy candidate as well. You laid out a pretty good case for him. I think the biggest thing you said there that I agree with is probably nobody in that range has his upside. We loved him as a prospect. We even held on to him through his injury. A lot of people did. If he has one good season, establishes himself as the starter there, who knows how high he could go? Tier 2, maybe even tier 3 probably. Just concerned about the depth of that room right now and how they're going to play players and how they're going to use them. But I think if I had to bet on one guy in that room, it would definitely be Javonte.
I agree. He is pretty risky right now, and it is a contract year. Maybe it's a little extra motivation for him, but if he doesn't come through, then he might not have another team invest in him as a starter, though. All right, David, who is your RB buy?
Yeah, I'm going with Kyren Williams, and it's not because of how many shares I have of him. No, so he is 23 years old. He's on a good offense with a smart play caller, great play designer. Last year, he finished 7th in total PPR points despite only playing in 12 games. He was 2nd in points per game, though, and he was closer to Christian McCaffrey, who was 1st, than he was to 3rd place, which was Alvin Kamara. He finished as an RB1 in 10 out of 12 weeks that he played, and he was top 5 in 6 out of 12. So half of those weeks, he's given you a top 5 finish. Of RBs with 100 or more carries last year, he was one of only 6 players to average 5 or more yards per carry. He was 4th in rush yards despite having 49 or more less carries than the 3 players above him, and the 3rd highest PFF run grade. And look, I think the main case against him right now is Blake Corum. They drafted him in the 3rd round. He was some people's RB1 going in, so he had a lot of hype. I get why if you were high on Corum, you might be a little lower on Kyren. One of the biggest talking points I've seen when people try to make that case is that Corum was a better prospect. Sure, he is. I'll give you that. But we've seen Kyren play in the NFL. He's no longer his prospect profile. He's an established stud. There's only one season, so things could change. I see Corum more as the perfect insurance policy for Kyren. I think they realized that without Kyren, their offense had to change, so they tried to find someone similar. They're similar size. They're both tough runners. They can both get you short yardage. They can both break off big plays. Neither's really anything special as a receiver. They're both all right in pass pro, but certainly nothing great. Corum did test better, so maybe he's just a bigger, stronger, faster Kyren. I just think with what Kyren did last year, that's a little too much projection for me. So I think Corum might take a few series here and there, and he's there so that when Kyren gets hurt, if he does get hurt, the Rams don't really have to change much. But I still really see this as Kyren's backfield. Might not be trying to buy him right now just because we just talked about this isn't the best time to buy running backs. But I'd probably trade a first for him as we get closer to the season. Might add a player or something. On Keep Trade Cut, basically the same value as Jonathan Brooks and Kenneth Walker. I would definitely take Kyren over both. If you're trying to position pivot, you see T. Higgins or Jordan Addison with about the same amount of value. I'm taking Kyren there if I need a running back. If not, we'll consider the wide receivers just because I like wide receivers. And I think you can probably even get them cheaper than that says, to be honest.
Yeah, I think there was a reported injury or something. I don't think it was anything major, but yeah, there was some Blake Corum buzz. So I think Kyren's price has fallen a little bit. And what I love about Kyren is being in LA with Stafford and McVay, like you mentioned. Stafford, he seems to always throw to his running backs a fair amount, and I think that's because he's not super mobile. So I think that really, really helps for the consistency and upside for Kyren. I think you are lower on Corum than I was. I like Corum pretty decently, and I think where my concern does start to creep in a little bit is around the goal line. Because Corum, he had 18 rushing touchdowns in 2022, and he had 27 last year. So I do think if Corum does start to eat into Kyren's load, it's probably in the red zone. But like you said, Kyren, he was RB2 in points per game, and it was by a pretty wide margin. So even if he does lose a little bit of work, he probably could still be a top 5 running back. And we have seen Sean McVay sticks typically with one running back. So there still is that upside that Corum really doesn't eat into Kyren's workload.
And even if he eats into it a little bit, you're still getting a pretty productive player that you're happy to slot in as a running back. And it was a foot injury, and everything that I've heard is they're just taking it slow with him, but he should be good to go for camp. So nothing to worry about there. Justin, why don't you tell us who your running back buy is?
My first buy is going to be two because I love running backs so much. I want to buy them all. No, I'm just kidding. It's actually a tandem running back room that I am looking to buy. I'm looking to buy Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren, not together, but I'm looking to buy whichever one is cheaper. I want to reach out in every league where I need running back and say to both managers, hey, can I get this guy for 2/3? This 1/3 is looking like it's going to be early. This team was the 101 last year. So that's the 301 next year and a mid third that could also be early. I'm seeing if that can get it done. And if that can't get it done and I have to pay a 25 second, I will pay a 25 second for these guys. I'm not looking to pay a second and a third. And I'm also not looking to pay a second that I think is for sure going to miss the playoffs. But like JP traded a 25 second for Jaylen Warren recently, I'm willing to pay that price for either of those guys, but I'm literally going to both managers and I'm looking for which guy is cheaper. Why am I buying these guys? Now that I've given you the price, the reason is simple. Arthur Smith and Russ Wilson. So Russ Wilson gave Samaje Perine 56 targets, Javonte Williams 58 targets, and Jaleel McLaughlin 36 targets last year. So if both of these guys get 50 to 60 targets or more, even though we expect Warren to be the passing down back, Russ also dumps it off pretty often on first and second down. So I think it's very possible both these guys get 60 plus targets because there's not going to be a third running back in this room. Please don't use Cordell Patterson like that. I swear to God, Arthur Smith, so healthy, so help all of us. We will show up in Pittsburgh. But that being said, these guys have upside in PPR leagues as well as they're going to be running the ball quite a bit because Arthur Smith likes to do that. So I can see both of these guys being RB2s. So if you can get an RB2 for a second, and like JP talks about in our tiers and theory episode, they have incredible upside should an injury occur. I think both these guys could be an RB1 if the other one gets injured and misses the entirety of the year, at least from that point onward. At that price, are you guys willing to buy them for a second? Kind of caveated, like I said.
Yeah, you recently did that, didn't you? I actually bought Najee for a late second earlier in the offseason as well. I think that's a fair price for both of them. I think if you care enough, you can plant your flag on either. But like Justin said, just whoever you can get cheaper is probably the smart play. I do think Arthur Smith hates the fantasy community. I know he probably doesn't pay attention to us, but it feels like he does. And I feel like most people in fantasy are high on Warren and low on Najee. So I'm going to bet on Najee if I have to bet on one, but I will take Warren if he's cheaper.
Yeah, last year, the Atlanta Falcons, they had the sixth most targets to the running back position. They were just a couple targets from being fourth with the most targets. So, yeah, that was the Arthur Smith team. You just said Russell Wilson checked it down a lot. So, between the two of them, it does seem like, especially with the state of their wide receiver room, not really having a clear number 2 or 3 wide receiver, that the running back room does seem to be in line to get a lot of targets, as well as the volume on the ground.
JP, why don't you tell us about your running back sell?
My sell is Zamir White. So Zamir White, he had an off season where he didn't have any great free agent running backs or any rookies join his backfield that really threatened his workload. So he is set to be the RB1 for the Raiders, and it doesn't really seem like it's going to be close. But he's all the way up at RB19 on Keep Trade Cut, and I just think that's too high. He doesn't possess a ton of upside as a pass catcher. He had 17 career catches coming out of college. So that's not really a big part of his game. His efficiency, it's been solid. I mean, it's not something that gets me super excited. But the Raiders, their over-under win total is 6.5 wins. So they're not expected to win a ton of games. So that indicates to me that the game script isn't going to be in Zamir White's favor unless he surprises us with some really great pass catching ability that I don't expect to see. And that also probably means that the touchdown opportunities are going to be limited because I don't think their offense is going to be amazing. It might be solid. They have some good pieces on offense, but the quarterback room is not something that I'm really excited about. So I think that in order for him to have a breakout season, it's probably going to have to be on the back of touchdowns and then really outperforming their win total. And I don't know. That's not something that I'm trying to bet on. But he's right in that RB dead zone. It's not the kind of player that I really want to bet on in the area. I want to have somebody that I think could break into, being a top 10 running back. It just seems like the Mike Davis situation a little bit. The Falcons, he was like the only guy there. They're like, oh, we got to draft him. He's going to get so much volume, but I just don't think he's all that great. And the guys that are going after him is really what convinces me is him as a sell. And there's Joe Mixon, who I prefer Joe Mixon so much more this year. The offense is way better. He's a better pass catcher, more touchdown upside. And then there's three guys that I think probably project similarly to Zamir White this year, but they have contingent upside. And that's Najee Harris, Jaylen Warren, and David Montgomery. They're all priced after him on Keep Trade Cut. And on Underdog, which that's where people are putting their money for redraft this year, all those guys are going ahead of Zamir White on Underdog, except for Jaylen Warren. So they're all expected to be better this year, and they have more upside, in my opinion. So I just think RB19 is just way too high for Zamir White.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think Mike Davis is a good comp. I was going to say Alexander Madison. He's a guy that, he had some hype in the community going in as a backup. The guy in front of him finally leaves. He gets his opportunity. Pretty much does nothing with it. People that bought him last offseason regretted it. It's just a risky profile to buy into. And at RB19, that's probably a little too high for me as well, especially with these guys you mentioned that are after him. I pretty much want all of them over him.
But yeah, all of us as a group, we have him higher on average than Zamir White. All of those guys ahead of Zamir White. So, David, who is your RB sell?
Can I just say all of them? Because I'm willing to sell all of them. I'll play the game a little bit. I did think about saying Brees here, and it's not because I don't like him. It's just because his injury makes me a little bit worried about his value insulation. But at the end of the day, I didn't really want to suggest my Dynasty RB2, considering that's where he's ranked in most people's rankings. So I went a little bit lower, and my RB sell is Tyjae Spears. Titans signed Pollard in the offseason. He has the 9th highest running back average salary per year. He's also, based on the guarantees, pretty much guaranteed a spot on the roster for the next 2 seasons. He was a little inconsistent last year, Pollard, that is. But he still has back-to-back seasons over 1,000 rushing yards. I expect him to get the early down work over Tyjae, and Spears might take some series here and there for sure. Even past that, Pollard's a solid receiving back as well. They don't necessarily need to pull him out ever to get Tyjae in there. And that's really what made Spears' game last year was all the targets he was getting, all the reception. If Pollard takes a dent out of that, I'm really worried about what he's going to be able to do and if he's even going to be like a week-to-week starter without a Pollard injury. Let me look at the new head coach, Brian Callahan. Comes from the Bengals, where when healthy, Joe Mixon has been the bell cow. He was injured most of 2020, so I excluded that season, but it's 2019 through last year. Mixon had an average of 4.2 times as many rush yards as the second leading rusher. So pretty big discrepancy there. And that's possible. It's just because Mixon was so much better than his backup every year. But it could also be a tendency from the coach. And you look at their offseason, they signed Calvin Ridley, Tyler Boyd. Huge upgrades to that wide receiver room, which was severely lacking after DeAndre Hopkins. So maybe they don't need to target the running back quite as much. If I can get a second for him, I'm definitely doing it. If I can get a second on another running back, that's even better. If it's a late second, I'm probably thinking, but still honestly probably going to do it. I actually recently sold Spears, so I'll mention that trade. It was Xavier Worthy and Tyjae Spears for Ladd McConkey and Deontay Johnson. Now, I'm pretty high on Ladd. I know most people think there's a pretty big difference between Worthy and Ladd in the market. There probably is. So maybe I sold a little short, but I really needed an extra wide receiver in that league. And I had a lot of running back depth, so this trade made sense to me. I also really like Deontay Johnson, to be honest. So, yeah, there's just an example of me selling him and roughly the price that I sold him for.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's a chance that he's better than Pollard this year, but I don't think, outside of the pass catching, I don't think he's like a special player on the ground necessarily. And like you said, they brought in Pollard for a reason. And I really don't like that their skill set overlaps like that. They have the wide receiver talent, so between splitting targets between Spears and Pollard, yeah, I'm pretty worried about Spears' upside. I would rather just sell him at RB21. Yeah, that's pretty high. It's ahead of those guys that we've just mentioned, Jaylen Warren and David Montgomery, those guys who also have projectable volume, but I think probably more upside contingently.
Yeah, I would agree with that for sure. All right, Justin, how about for your running back sell? Who you got?
My running back sell is Isiah Pacheco, and that's simply just because of where he's valued as the RB12. He's a guy that I think you can get a 25 first for in most leagues, and that's the price point I'm looking to sell him for. If I can't get a 25 first, I'm probably happy holding him unless I'm rebuilding, in which case I'm looking to get a wide receiver who I think is worth a first. Guys that we talked about in our wide receiver video, we kind of talked about that line on who's worth a first. Those are the types of guys, or a 25 first, a 26 first for him if I can. I'm not looking to move him for 2 seconds unless I'm rebuilding, then I would consider doing that. So it's not a sell at all costs. It's a sell at a RB1 in Dynasty cost, which is where he's at and keep trade cut right now. I think he has a pretty good chance. He only had 7 touchdowns last year. He had 44 receptions last year. So he has an opportunity to improve both of those numbers, I feel like, actually. And he could really actually be a pretty solid running back for fantasy. But I feel like he's priced pretty close to his ceiling. And for that reason, I'm out because I like to sell these guys close to their ceiling, but I'm not looking to sell for anything. Like I said, my point is a 25 first, unless it's a rebuild, in which case I'm probably looking to get less just to get out and not hurt my 101 the following year. At that sales price, are you guys both out on him as well? David first.
Oh yeah, I'd definitely take a first for Pacheco. I was thinking about making him my sell as well. And Justin, we were talking about Tank Dell the other day. You said you had a blind spot on him. I kind of feel that for Pacheco. He's fun to watch and all. I don't get the feeling Casey's going to invest highly in a running back. He does have 2 years left on his contract, so you could write it out. But I just don't see him being the long-term answer there.
Yeah, I would sell him for a first as well. If I'm competing, I might pay 2 seconds for him, but yeah, if I can sell him for a first, I'm going to take that for a running back of his caliber for sure.
Yeah, how often is that for RBs where we have a different buy and sell price? Pretty much all the time.